An ex-soldier shared his lunch with a homeless man. That night, he won the lottery ticket the man gave him. James Conner couldn't have known this simple act would change everything. But perhaps somewhere deep inside, he was desperately hoping something would. The November wind cut through his worn military jacket like it was made of paper. 6 months since discharge, and James still hadn't adjusted to civilian life. The nightmares came almost nightly. Explosions, screams, the weight of responsibility for the men lost under his command. During the day, the memories faded to a dull ache, but they never truly disappeared. He clutched his brown paper bag lunch tighter as he made his way across Jefferson Park. The bench he chose each day was unoccupied as usual. There was something comforting about routine, even in the loneliness of it all. Military habits die hard. Same bench, same time, same precisely cut sandwich made in his sparse apartment kitchen. The city bustled around him, but James felt invisible. People rushed by with their coffee cups and important conversations, glancing through him rather than at him. His therapist called it dissociation, this feeling of watching life from behind glass, disconnected from everyone else. 4 tours in Afghanistan had changed him in ways no one back home could understand. He unwrapped his sandwich methodically, turkey on wheat with no condiments. As he raised it to his mouth, something caught his attention. A man huddled under a tattered blue tarp beneath the oak tree 20 yards away. The man wasn't begging or holding a sign. He was simply trying to exist, to endure the increasingly bitter cold with dignity. James recognized that posture. The way the man held himself slightly rigid despite his circumstances. Military. Had to be. The realization hit James like a physical blow. That could be me. A few more unlucky breaks. A few more nightmares driving away sleep and job opportunities. And that tarp could be his only shelter. Before he could second-guess himself, James rewrapped half his sandwich and gathered his thermos of coffee. His legs carried him across the leaf-strewn grass almost automatically. "Thought you might want something warm," James said, his voice rusty from disuse. When was the last time he'd spoken to another person outside of necessity? The man looked up, and James felt something electric pass between them. Recognition. Not of faces, but of experiences. "That's mighty kind of you, brother." The man's beard was gray and untrimmed, but his eyes were clear blue and startlingly alert. "Don't get much kindness these days." James nodded, awkward in his charity. "I'm James. Michael." The man accepted the coffee with gloved hands that had fingerless tips, revealing skin reddened by cold. "You Army? 3rd Infantry. You? Marines." "Long time ago." Michael took a sip of the coffee, closing his eyes briefly at the warmth. "Good stuff." James shifted his weight. "Mind if I join you?" Michael gestured to a dry patch of grass. "My dining room's always open." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes. James found himself studying Michael's face. The weathered lines, the scar along his jawline, the way his eyes constantly scanned the park perimeter. "Old habits." "How long you been back?" Michael finally asked. 6 months, 2 weeks, 4 days. James answered without hesitation. Michael nodded, understanding the precision. "Tough adjustment." "Yeah." The single word carried the weight of sleepless nights, failed job interviews, and relationships that crumbled under the strain of his silence. "Gets easier." Michael took another bite of sandwich. "Then harder again. Then easier." It's not a straight line. James felt something loosen in his chest. 6 months of therapy hadn't given him the relief that this simple exchange provided. Someone who just knew without explanation. "You got people?" Michael asked. James shook his head. "Parents passed while I was deployed. No siblings." "Girlfriend couldn't..." He trailed off. "Understand the silence." Michael finished for him. "Yeah." They finished eating, and James found himself telling Michael things he hadn't voiced to anyone. About the ambush that took 3 of his men, about the child he couldn't save in a village raid gone wrong, about waking up screaming in sweat-soaked sheets. Michael listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or sharing a brief story of his own. The afternoon sun began its early winter descent, casting long shadows across the park. "Better get going," James said finally. "Getting cold." Michael nodded. "Thanks for the meal and the company." "Been a while since either." James hesitated. "I come here most days. Around the same time. Might see you around then." Michael's smile transformed his face, making him appear years younger. As James stood to leave, Michael reached into his coat pocket. "Almost forgot. Got something for you." He pulled out a crumpled lottery ticket. "Bought this yesterday with my last dollar." Feeling was strong, but the numbers speak to you, not me. "You should have it." James started to protest, but Michael pressed the ticket into his palm. "Take it." Universe has its ways. Reluctantly, James pocketed the ticket. Thanks. See you tomorrow, maybe? Count on it, Michael replied, though something in his tone seemed distant, as if he were already thinking of something else. The walk back to his apartment felt different. The city noise that usually grated on James's hyper-vigilant nerves seemed muted. For the first time in months, the tension in his shoulders had loosened slightly. His apartment was as he'd left it, sparse, military neat, with few personal touches. The only photographs were of his unit, carefully arranged on a side table. He hadn't been able to look at them for months but couldn't bring himself to put them away either. James made himself a simple dinner, moving through the routine that had become his life. After eating, he emptied his pockets and noticed the lottery ticket Michael had given him. In the bright light of his kitchen, he could see it was for that night's drawing. Wednesday's Powerball. He smoothed out the wrinkled paper. The numbers meant nothing to him. 8, 17, 22, 42, 47, and odd of them. He set the ticket on his counter, planning to check the results later out of curiosity. But as the evening progressed, the ticket seemed to call to him. It represented something he couldn't quite name. A connection, perhaps. An unexpected moment of humanity in a day otherwise identical to all the others since his return. At 10:55, James found himself turning on the television to catch the lottery drawing. He rarely watched TV. The noise and rapid images could sometimes trigger his anxiety. But tonight felt different. The cheerful lottery host appeared on screen, making small talk with his co-host as the machine with the numbered balls was prepared. James sat on the edge of his sofa, the ticket clutched in his hand. Tonight's Powerball jackpot stands at $287 million, the announcer said brightly. Let's see who the lucky winner will be. The machine began to spin, and one by one the numbers were called. 8. James glanced at his ticket. First number matched. 17. A strange feeling began to build in his stomach. 22. His hand trembled slightly. 42. Heart pounding now. 47. He couldn't breathe. And the Powerball is 6. The room seemed to tilt around him. James stared at the television, then at the ticket, then back again. All 6 numbers matched perfectly. He'd won. The jackpot. All of it. The rational part of his brain suggested he might be hallucinating. He checked the numbers again and again. He went to his laptop and pulled up the lottery website. The same numbers glowed on the screen. A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside him, a sound so foreign he barely recognized it as his own. It gave way to something else, tears. For the first time since the ambush that had claimed his friends, James cried. Not the silent tears of grief he'd shed at funerals, but deep, heaving sobs that racked his entire body. It wasn't about the money, though. That was overwhelming enough. It was the absurdity, the sheer impossible coincidence of it all. A homeless veteran gives away his last dollar to buy a lottery ticket, then gives that ticket away, and it wins hundreds of millions. When the emotion finally subsided, James sat in stunned silence, trying to process what had happened. His first coherent thought was of Michael. He had to find him, to tell him, to share this impossible windfall. The money belonged to Michael as much as to him, more so perhaps. Sleep was impossible. James paced his apartment until dawn, making plans. He would go to the lottery office later, but first he needed to find Michael. The park opened at 6. He'd be there waiting. The morning air was bitter cold as James hurried across the city streets. The park was nearly empty, just a few early joggers circling the paths. He made his way straight to the oak tree where he'd found Michael the day before. The blue tarp was gone. So was Michael. James searched the entire park, checking every bench, every sheltered area. No sign of the man. A groundskeeper raking leaves hadn't seen anyone matching Michael's description. The coffee cart vendor, who'd been there for years, just shook his head. Homeless folks move around a lot this time of year, he offered, looking for warmer spots before the real winter hits. James returned to the oak tree, searching for any clue to Michael's whereabouts. Nothing remained but a flattened patch of grass where the tarp had been. For 3 days, James returned to the park at different times, hoping to catch sight of the man who had changed his life with a simple gesture. He checked nearby shelters and soup kitchens, describing Michael to volunteers and staff. No one recognized him. On the 4th day, James went to claim his winnings. He chose the lump sum option, $147 million after taxes. The lottery officials arranged a press conference, which James reluctantly agreed to on one condition. He wanted to publicly search for Michael. Standing before the cameras, James felt exposed in a way that made combat seem simple by comparison. He clutched the oversized check, uncomfortable with the attention, but determined to use it. I'm looking for the rightful owner of at least half of this money, he told the reporters. A homeless veteran named Michael who gave me this ticket in Jefferson Park last Wednesday. If anyone knows where I can find him, please contact the number on your screen. The story exploded overnight. Local news picked it up first, then national. Homeless Heroes lottery ticket and veteran seeks veteran. The $147 million search became headline news. James's phone rang constantly with tips and sightings, none of which panned out. 2 weeks passed. James moved to a hotel suite to escape the attention at his apartment building. He hired a private investigator and established a foundation focused on homeless veterans while continuing to search for Michael. The money sat virtually untouched in James's new bank account. He couldn't bring himself to spend it beyond covering the investigation costs. It felt wrong, tainted somehow, to enjoy this windfall while the man who had made it possible remained lost. A month after the winning ticket, James received a call from a VA hospital 60 miles outside the city. Mr. Connor? This is Dr. Elisa Ramirez from Veterans Memorial Medical Center. We have a patient here who may be the man you're looking for. James drove there immediately, his heart hammering with anticipation and dread. He was led to a quiet room in the hospital's oncology ward, where a nurse softly knocked before opening the door. The man in the bed was thinner than James remembered, the gray beard now shaved to reveal hollow cheeks. But the clear blue eyes were unmistakable. Michael, James breathed. The man turned, recognition dawning slowly. The bench guy, with the sandwich. His voice was weaker but carried the same quiet dignity. James moved to the bedside, emotions choking him. I've been looking everywhere for you. Michael nodded slightly. Saw you on the TV in the shelter before they brought me here. Quite a ticket, huh? It was your ticket, James said. Your dollar, your choice to give it away. Half the money is yours, more than half. A faint smile crossed Michael's lips. Don't need it where I'm heading. The simple statement hit James like a physical blow. The doctors, stage 4, pancreatic, knew it before I met you. That's why I was living in the park. Didn't see the point in treatment. Wanted to feel the air, see the trees. Michael's gaze drifted to the window. The VA found me passed out. Brought me here. James struggled to find words. There must be experimental treatments, specialists. Michael raised a hand weakly. Had my time, made peace with it. He looked directly at James. But I'm glad I found you first. Why? James asked, bewildered. Why give me your last lottery ticket? Michael was quiet for a moment. Saw something in you. Something familiar. A good man caring too much. When I bought that ticket, had this feeling it was important, but not for me. He shrugged slightly. Call it a dying man's intuition. They talked for hours. Michael shared fragments of his life. 30 years in the Marines, a wife who had died of cancer herself 10 years earlier, 2 estranged children he hadn't spoken to in years. After retirement, depression and PTSD had gradually eroded his life until he found himself homeless, then diagnosed with terminal cancer. Not how I planned things, he said simply. Before James left that evening, he pressed a business card into Michael's hand with a phone number. My lawyer. I've set up a trust. For your children. Whether you reconcile with them or not, the money will be there. Michael's eyes filled with tears. You don't owe me anything. It's not about owing, James replied. It's about what's right. In the days that followed, James visited Michael daily. He brought real coffee, decent food, books, and most importantly, companionship. They talked about war and peace, regret and hope. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence. James used his resources to locate Michael's children, a daughter in Oregon, a son in Florida. He didn't tell Michael at first, unsure if they would respond to his outreach. A week later, Sarah, Michael's daughter, called James. Her voice was guarded, hurt evident in every word. He left us after Mom died, just disappeared into his grief. He's dying, James said simply. I think he'd like to see you, but he's too proud to ask. 3 days later, Sarah arrived at the hospital. James watched from the hallway as she hesitantly entered her father's room. He saw her rigid posture, the way she stood at a distance from the bed. Then something shifted. She moved forward, and though James couldn't hear the words, he saw her take her father's hand. Michael's son arrived the following weekend. The reunion was harder, with raised voices that eventually gave way to tears and embraces that James glimpsed through the partially open door. As Michael's condition deteriorated, James used his newfound wealth to ensure he had the best care possible. He arranged for a private room with a view of the hospital gardens, hired additional nurses, brought in specialists who, while they couldn't offer a cure, could make Michael's remaining time more comfortable. 6 weeks after James found him, Michael called James to his bedside. "Need to ask you something important," he said, his voice now barely above a whisper. James leaned closer. "Anything. The money. The part you kept. What will you do with it?" The question caught James off guard. He hadn't thought much about his portion of the winnings, focused as he'd been on finding Michael and then supporting him. "I don't know," he admitted. "Doesn't seem real yet." Michael's hand found his, the grip surprisingly strong. "Don't waste it on things. Use it for purpose." His blue eyes held James's with fierce intensity. "Promise me." "I promise," James said, meaning it. Michael nodded, satisfied. "Good." He closed his eyes briefly, gathering strength. "Now I need one more favor." 2 days later, James helped Michael into a wheelchair. With blankets tucked around him and an oxygen tank discreetly attached, they left the hospital, against medical advice but with reluctant permission for a few hours' absence. James drove them to Jefferson Park. The December air was cold but still, the sky a perfect clear blue. He wheeled Michael to the bench where they had first shared lunch, now nearly 2 months ago. "Perfect," Michael murmured, gazing up at the branches of the oak tree, now bare of leaves. They sat together as the afternoon light slowly faded, Michael occasionally pointing out birds or commenting on passing clouds. His children joined them later, bringing coffee and sandwiches, a small, improvised picnic. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the park, Michael reached for James's hand again. "Thank you," he said simply. James swallowed the lump in his throat. "For what?" "For making my last chapter matter." Michael died 3 days later, with his children and James at his bedside. The funeral was small but dignified, with full military honors that James had arranged. Several of Michael's former Marine colleagues appeared, having seen the news stories. They shared stories of his courage and leadership, painting a picture of a man who had been heroic long before he gave away a winning lottery ticket. In the months that followed, James kept his promise. He established the Michael Kelly Foundation for Homeless Veterans, using the majority of his winnings to create transitional housing, mental health services, and employment training. The first facility opened in the building he purchased across from Jefferson Park. He reconnected with his former unit members, reaching out to each one personally. Some were thriving in civilian life, others were struggling as he had been. He offered help where needed, not just financial, but the understanding and companionship he had found so healing in his brief friendship with Michael. The nightmares didn't disappear entirely, but they came less frequently. James found purpose in the foundation work, slowly building a new life centered around service rather than isolation. 1 year to the day after he had shared his lunch with Michael, James sat on their bench in Jefferson Park. The foundation building across the street now housed 30 veterans, transitioning from homelessness, with a cafe on the ground floor that provided job training and was open to the public. As he unwrapped his sandwich, turkey on wheat, some habits remained unchanged, he noticed a young woman hesitantly approaching. She carried a small child in her arms, a boy of about 2 with startlingly blue eyes. "Mr. Connor?" she asked. "I'm sorry to bother you. I'm Lisa. Michael Kelly was my uncle." James stood immediately. "Please join me." She sat beside him, settling the child on her lap. "I wanted to thank you in person. What you did for my uncle, and now for so many others." She gestured toward the foundation building. "It's extraordinary." "He was the extraordinary one," James replied. "The money was his. I'm just following through." Lisa smiled, bouncing the child gently. "We named him Michael. He was born the day after my uncle passed." James felt something catch in his throat as he looked at the child, who gazed back at him with curious eyes that seemed somehow familiar. "Would you like to hold him?" Lisa asked. James hesitated, then nodded. She placed the child carefully in his arms. The boy regarded him solemnly for a moment, then broke into a sudden, radiant smile. In that moment, sitting on the bench where everything had changed, holding new life named after the man who had saved him, with a simple act of connection, James finally understood what Michael had meant that day in the hospital. Don't waste it on things. Use it for purpose. The real lottery win hadn't been the money. It had been finding meaning again, finding connection. The jackpot was this: sitting in the winter sunlight, surrounded by the evidence that one life could touch another, that pain could give way to purpose, that even in our darkest moments, unexpected light could find its way in. James smiled back at the child in his arms, feeling the weight of his promise fulfilled and the lightness of a future newly imagined. Around them, the park continued its everyday symphony of life, people hurrying, lingering, connecting, existing. And somewhere, perhaps, Michael was watching, his clear blue eyes crinkling at the corners. nodding in quiet approval.